Snow hissed under rushing shoes and spinning tires when the little girl tugged his coat, the sudden pull slicing through his stride like a hand on the brakes. He almost snapped, late, surrounded. Already bleeding minutes, but her mitten clung with quiet desperation. Small fingers shaking through thick wool. She pointed at the store window where a Christmas tree burned with soft gold light, ornaments glowing like held breaths behind glass. "Please," she said, voice thin and brave, cracking at the edges. "Can we borrow one? Just for tonight." He followed her finger without meaning to. The tree stood tall and perfect, reflected endlessly in the glass, a promise he hadn't touched in years. Cold air pressed against his lungs. The city roared around them, horns, footsteps, life moving too fast. He felt ridiculous standing there in a tailored coat, a CEO's armor, while something fragile pulled at a seam inside his chest. Borrow. The word echoed, absurd and dangerous. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Deadlines, decisions, a life built on never stopping. But for one suspended second, the calendar cracked, and all he could see was a child asking the impossible with everything she had left. He knelt in the slush, the cold seeping instantly through his knee, a shock that felt earned. Up close, her eyes were wider than he'd thought, glassy with held-back panic, lashes dusted with melting snow. "Borrow?" He repeated, softer now, like testing a language he'd forgotten. The word tasted wrong in his mouth. Nothing in his world was borrowed. Everything owned, leveraged, controlled. She nodded hard, as if afraid he'd disappear if she stopped moving. The teddy bear was tucked under her arm, threadbare and loyal, its head pressed into her coat for courage. "We'll bring it back," she rushed, tripping over the promise. "Mama says we always return things, even if it hurts." Her lip trembled at that, and she swallowed it down with the discipline of someone too young to be this brave. He felt the city tilt. Snowflakes landed on her red hat and melted instantly, like time refusing to stay. He searched for the catch, the adult behind the plea, the trick, the demand, but found only need. His phone buzzed again, angry this time, vibrating against his leg like a warning. He ignored it, breath fogging the space between them. "Why tonight?" he asked, knowing the answer would cost him something. She leaned closer, as if the truth were fragile. "Because Mama's sick," she whispered, eyes dropping to the wet pavement. "She says Christmas helps her remember who she is." Silence pressed in after that, heavy and unforgiving. He saw his reflection in the glass behind her, kneeling, exposed, and felt a tightness spread in his chest, the kind that comes right before a decision that changes everything. Her mother stood a few steps back, half hidden by the falling snow, as if distance could protect her from hope. She was thinner than the cold should allow, coat pulled tight, shoulders locked in a quiet battle with weakness. When their eyes met, something flinched in her, fear, pride, gratitude, all tangled together. She moved forward just enough to be seen, not enough to intrude. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, the words practiced, worn smooth from use. Her voice carried a tremor she tried to bury. It wasn't clear who she was apologizing to. Him, her daughter, the season pressing in around them. The girl didn't look back. She stayed focused on him, as if turning away might break the fragile bridge she'd built. The man felt the weight shift. This wasn't a whim. This was a family balancing on one night. The city surged behind them, people passing with wrapped boxes and loud laughter, unaware of the quiet emergency unfolding on the sidewalk. He noticed the mother's hands, bare and red, clenched at her sides to keep from reaching out. Pride held her still, even as her eyes betrayed a plea she refused to voice. He straightened slightly, still kneeling, and felt something unfamiliar, being seen not as power or solution, but as a stranger who might choose kindness or walk away. Snow settled on his shoulders, melting into dark spots on his coat. The girl's breath puffed white in the air. Time stretched, brittle and sharp, waiting to see whether he would step back into the crowd, or lean into the moment that was already pulling him in. His phone buzzed again, more insistent now. A vibration that crawled up his leg like a reminder of who he was supposed to be. Board members, numbers, consequences. He glanced at the dark screen and, in it, caught a flicker of his own face, older than he felt, tighter than he admitted. He thought of his son's room at home, untouched tonight. The small plastic tree still folded in a box because work had won again last December. He remembered the silence after the apology, how it lingered longer than the words ever could. The little girl shifted her weight, snow crunching under her boots. He saw the moment she braced herself for disappointment, The subtle stiffening children learn when promises fail. Something in his chest tightened, sharp and decisive. He exhaled, long and slow, like stepping off a ledge. He rose to his feet, towering again, and the world seemed to wait. "Take the tree," he said, the words landing with a calm that surprised him. Not dramatic, final. He reached into his coat, already committing to the fallout. "I'll handle it." The mother's breath caught, audible even over the street noise. Her hand flew to her mouth, eyes shining with a gratitude that hurt to witness. The girl's face lit up so fast it felt like watching night surrender to morning. Snow kept falling, indifferent and endless. But for him, the noise of the city dulled, replaced by a single terrifying clarity. He had chosen this moment over everything else, and there was no going back. The store door flew open with a blast of warm air and sharp music, bells jangling like an alarm. The manager stepped out fast, jaw tight, eyes already calculating loss. "Sir," he snapped, voice cutting through the snowfall. "That tree is not—" His gaze flicked to the girl, the mother, the situation, and hardened anyway. Rules were rules. The man turned slowly, feeling the old switch flip inside him. The one that usually closed deals and ended arguments. But this time it wasn't fueled by ego. It was fueled by resolve. "I'll buy it," he said evenly, pulling out his wallet. "Now." The manager hesitated, emboldened by policy, opening his mouth again. "I'll buy every tree on this sidewalk if I have to." The man continued, eyes steady, voice low but unyielding. "But that one is going home with them." The words hung in the cold like a challenge no one wanted to take. Pedestrians slowed. Snow settled on shoulders. The girl gasped, a small sound of disbelief, hands flying to her mouth as if joy itself were dangerous. The mother shook her head, whispering no. Tears finally breaking free, her strength giving way all at once. The manager looked at the scene, at the money, the witnesses, the truth of it, and exhaled. Stepping aside. "Fine," he muttered. Relief hit like a wave. The girl laughed, bright and sudden, cutting straight through the winter air. The man felt his pulse hammer, adrenaline fading into something warmer, heavier. He hadn't just won an argument. He'd crossed a line he didn't know he'd been standing on, and the night was already changing because of it. They lifted the tree together, its weight awkward and alive, needles brushing his gloves, sap sharp and clean in the air. The girl insisted on holding one end, standing on her toes, face set with fierce importance. "I can help," she said, and he let her, adjusting his grip so the branches wouldn't scratch her. The tree swayed as they stepped away from the store, lights from the window sliding across its ornaments like passing stars. The mother hovered close, hands fluttering, torn between caution and wonder. "You don't have to," she started again. But the words dissolved into a shaky laugh as the girl spun slightly, delight spilling out of her in small bursts. Snow clung to the branches, turning the tree into something wild and brave, like it belonged to the night. As they walked, the man felt the strange intimacy of shared effort. His breath fogged white, syncing with theirs. Cars slowed, strangers smiled, the city briefly acknowledging the quiet miracle moving through it. He caught the girl glancing up at him, eyes glowing. Trust given without reservation. It landed heavy in his chest. The mother finally found her voice softer now. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, tears streaking cold down her cheeks. He shook his head, focusing on the steady crunch of snow underfoot, on the weight in his hands anchoring him to the present. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't leading a deal or a life alone. He was simply carrying something precious through the dark. And it felt like the right kind of hard. Their apartment door opened with a tired creak, warmth spilling out in a thin, hopeful wave. The space was small, dimly lit, but clean, every corner showing careful effort. He ducked instinctively as they brought the tree inside, branches brushing the ceiling, needles scattering like green sparks across the worn floor. The girl laughed, a sound so pure it seemed to polish the room. They set the tree down by the window where the city lights leaked in, crooked but defiant, leaning slightly as if it had survived something to get here. The man stepped back, heart pounding, suddenly unsure of his place. This was their world, intimate and fragile. He didn't want to break it just by standing wrong. The girl darted to a shoebox and returned with handmade ornaments, paper stars, ribbon loops, a cracked bell tied with thread. She chose carefully, then held one out to him. "You should do the first one," she said, solemn as a vow. His hands shook as he hung it, the paper brushing his fingers. For a second, the room felt suspended. The mother leaned against the counter, eyes closed, breathing slow, as if the sight alone eased something inside her. When she opened them, they shone. The girl stepped back, proud. "You're Santa," she said with complete certainty. The words hit him harder than any boardroom victory ever had. He swallowed, throat tight, and nodded because it was easier than explaining why his eyes suddenly burned. The tree stood there, uneven and glowing in borrowed light. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He stepped back into the night and pulled the door closed gently, as if sound itself might undo what they'd built. The cold hit him harder now, biting through his coat, but it felt honest. Snow fell thicker, blurring the edges of the city, softening the hard lines of glass and steel. From behind the door came a muffled laugh, weak but real, followed by the girl's delighted clapping. It stopped him mid-step. His phone lit up in his hand, vibrating urgently, names and numbers stacking like demands. He stared at it, then at the dark window where the crooked tree glowed, paper ornaments casting fragile shadows. For once he didn't answer. He let it ring until the screen went black, until the silence felt earned. He stood there longer than he meant to, breath fogging, chest tight with something that hurt and healed at the same time. He thought of his son, of the call he would finally make, of how some nights change you quietly and forever. As he walked away, the city seemed different, less cruel, more human. Somewhere above him in a small apartment, a borrowed tree stood tall, a sick woman smiled, and a child believed in Santa with her whole heart. And for the first time in years, he believed too.